Hello, and welcome to the Santaland podcast. I created it just for you. I'm your host, Tony Felice, and each episode I'll read to you for 10 minutes, and then we'll talk about what we just heard. Like the cricket in my story, I'll guide you through a grown-up fairy tale, one that explores ideas of existence, identity, and the soul's journey through trauma, and the transformative power of love. By the end, you'll have heard my whole story, a sneak peek into the creative process of bringing a book to life. Maybe we'll read other books together. But for now, follow the wise cricket and discover the Santaland within yourself, a place of hope, connection, and peace that's already inside of you. This podcast is especially made for those like me who feel a little different and maybe talk about math at weddings or philosophy at funerals. And like me, maybe you have a loving husband, or a wife, or somebody else that loves you. If not, we're here to love you, because you're in good company, my dear friends, here in Santaland. Hello, and welcome back to the Santaland podcast. I'm your host, and I am so happy that you're here. Can you believe we're already up to chapter 23? So without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 23, entitled 333. David walked towards the tighter packed sand. He meandered along the shore, moving at a slow, measured pace, thinking, "That's Tom telling me to slow down all the time." David saw more trash. Crap! Then he looked closer. "Look, Brammy, 3 pieces of trash over there," he pointed. 3 people standing over there. And his eyes noticed the lifeguard tower number 3. Interesting. 333 again. Wendy passed at 3:33 on a Sunday, surrounded by her 3 children. Since then, the 3, or triptych of 3s, seemed to follow him everywhere. His phone, a conference room door, a hotel room, a frequency. Maybe it was his way of having his own personal connection to Wendy's death. He thought, Wendy's way of reaching out to me from across the veil? He felt loved by Wendy and by Mac. They'd said it enough times for him to really feel it. He liked pointing out the sequence of numbers to Tom and to the family. He imagined it must have taken enormous energy for Wendy to whisper in his ear from the great beyond, to look at a clock, or a building, or a collection of things that made up the prophetic 333s that seemed to follow him everywhere. "When did you start buying 3 of everything?" Tom asked. "Because of Wendy," David said. "Maybe I'm hedging a bet, like you like to say." But for David, it felt like it was more than that. He walked past the guard station and the birds sitting on it. He saluted them with a smile. They ignored him. He was fine with that. He liked anonymity and managed to put together a small group of residents to scour the beach every day for trash, one day turning it into a small nonprofit, all while remaining pretty much anonymous. Sure, they knew he ran the store in town with Claire, and they knew that he lived on Christmas Hill, but they assumed he worked there or lived in the small guard cottage near the sign. Only a few people knew about the compound beyond. Hopefully it stays that way, David thought. He stopped and watched 2 dusky seagulls argue with their mother, white and gray, full of intense squawking, loud enough to cut through the wind and jangle his nerves. Nearby, sandpipers stood in authority, a moment of quiet as the wind blew past them, knees bent backwards, eyes blinking. David turned, pulled himself away from the scene. It was getting late. A marine layer was threatening. He began looking for landscape cues to take him back to the long, rickety stairs. There they are. As he reached the top of the stairs, he looked for the truck and found it, red and battered. He thought there are a lot of old and battered things around here. Smiling. Everybody loved it, the dusty old truck. The blind kids especially, because while they couldn't see the truck, they marveled at its bubbly features, the texture of its doors, the feel of the metal against landscape hands. It was a boyhood dream, an old red truck. He used it to transport trees and flowers, and to bring home a Christmas tree if they were in town for it. They sometimes posed in front of the truck for Christmas cards. It felt very cozy in Norman Rockwell to run into neighbors each year at the tree farm. One year, a surprising dusting of snow caught everyone off guard, and the nursery owners put out hot apple cider and donuts for the customers. They stood around a makeshift counter, hopping from one foot to the other to stay warm, and they visited with neighbors and talked about their lives with a blush on their cheeks and gladness in their hearts. I love it when David has these thoughts. Don't you? David crossed at the light. The spell of the ocean was losing its silvery grip as he turned his back against the marine layer mist and started the return trek towards home on a crest far above on a hill. Okay, so this particular chapter again moves the story forward, but we have a plane flying over. Stand by. I often tell people the good thing is we live 8 miles from the airport, and the bad thing is we live 8 miles from the airport. But so this is moving the story forward, but my mother did die at 3:33 on a Sunday afternoon with her 3 children there, her 3 biological children, with my adopted sister Stephanie. And so since then we've seen that number 333 everywhere. It's almost as if my mother shows up and gives us a little sign when our hearts are hurting or when we can't seem to figure out how the world is going and what's happening. It brings us comfort. We have a clock in the house. It sits on our table in the coffee table in the living room. And it's an old-fashioned clock that sits on a pedestal, sort of like a tripod, if you will. And the clock moves by itself. And it not visible, but over time, we notice that the clock moves from the position where it's facing us on the couch to facing a completely different direction. And we can't make heads or tails of it. It's not vibration. Nothing in the house moves. It's just this one clock. And there's a connection to my mom and that clock. And there's something interesting about the fact that that thing moves. Like so many of the other interesting things, like candles. We have a candle for my mom that she gave us. It was for a birthday present. It's a fall kind of candle. And she gave it to us in 2009. It has not worked. And then suddenly it works. Same battery, not rusted, and the light is on right now. Out of nowhere. Just came on after 9 years. And it's still doing its little flicker. So 333s are very important, and it's always Tim, it seems, that notices it and points it out. So it made sense that David, his character David, would notice those things when he's on a walk on the beach. So that's it for our episode 333. I'm so glad that you're here listening to the Santaland podcast, and I hope you stick around for every other chapter that follows.